Hey everybody, welcome back to AI Play Super Mario Bros. 3. I'm really excited for this one. If you haven't seen the first video in this two-part series of Playfun playing Super Mario 3, you definitely want to go back and watch the first video in the series because that'll give you the explanation of what's going on. I'm just doing a quick and dirty intro this time. I'm not doing any fancy details here, so I'm gonna assume you've seen the first video. But thank you so much to everybody who watched that one and gave it a like and commented on it. It got 10 times more views than the first couple videos in this series, so I was kind of blown away. So thank you so much. Glad you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the second part and the next few videos I've got planned. I hope you enjoy them just as much. At the end of this video, I'm going to do a brief wrap-up explaining what I learned from this whole process of working with Playfun with Mario 3, and also read a few of your comments from the previous video, so you'll want to catch that at the end. For now, I'm just going to jump right into what happened after what you saw in the first video. You saw how it did there, and how I got stuck on one random obstacle in World 1-3.
I wasn't really satisfied with this outcome. I mean, it would have been one thing if Playfun had just played really poorly throughout, you know, kind of like that. Not gonna try to explain that one. But to watch it play so well and then get stymied by one obstacle by what appears to be sheer fluke, I just wasn't happy with that. So I decided to try to improve its gameplay, see if I could get it past that obstacle by giving it new training data. Ideally, I would have tweaked the training data I already had and tried to keep it as similar as possible, just with a few minor changes, but I'm not quite familiar enough with the system yet to do that. I'm hoping to get to that point. So I basically re-recorded new training data. It was the best option I had at the moment. And in my first revision of the training data, I included a lot more high bouncing, both off of the note blocks and off of enemies. But otherwise, the gameplay was largely the same. Now, Playfun does some really cool stuff here. I mean, look at this pro gameplay right here. I mean, I would swear this was a human person playing. And it gets the high bounce here. That gave me a little bit of hope, but then it started pausing like crazy. You saw it pausing a little bit in its first playthrough, and we kind of laughed it off, but from here on out, pausing is going to become a big problem. And it's a tough problem to eliminate because Playfun always has the start button as part of its repertoire of inputs. See, in addition to establishing the objective functions that Playfun's going to try to satisfy, Learnfun also builds a library of input sequences based on the inputs that you use and the sequences of inputs that you use when you are recording the training data. And in my experience of using this program, if a particular input is never pressed in the training data, then Playfun will never use that input. For example, if I never once press the down button in the training data, then Playfun will never press the down button, and as a result, will never go into a pipe, which is why it got stuck when it got to the warp zone in Mario 1. But the start button input is always there, because that's the button you have to press to start the game for every single Nintendo game I've ever played in my life. Despite that, I didn't see Playfun pause even one time while it was playing Mario 1, but in Mario 3, it started pausing all the time. And at this point, I figured it was because of this. When you first load up the game, you're not right on the start screen. You have this intro animation that plays. You press start once to interrupt the animation and go to the start screen, and then you press start again to start the game. I figured that double start press was the culprit, and I didn't realize until a bit later that there was actually something I could do about that. So for the time being, this is what I got. Besides the pausing, Playfun pulls off some pretty impressive looking tricks here. In fact, it seems to think at this point that the objective of the game is just to acquire points. Moving to the right and actually completing the level doesn't seem to be a priority for it at all. It plays with a shell, kind of like a cat with a ball of yarn, until it loses it. Can't figure out what to do, just hops to the right for a while and jumps in the pit. And then just more of the same. I found it interesting here how it runs away from this fireball to avoid losing its mushroom. So it's got some impetus to avoid getting hit, but not to progress. In fact, it messes around on this very first screen for an abnormally long time before finally moving on and resuming sort of the antics we saw before, but at no point did it progress to the end of the first level, so this was a failure. Clearly it needed a higher priority on progressing through the level, and I figured maybe I had done a little too much backtracking in my training data. So I gave it some new training data, and this time I played, again, pretty much the same as the previous two sets of training data, but I just cut out any unnecessary backtracking and made sure to push through the levels as quickly as I could. So surely this should produce some quality gameplay that We're all going to marvel at the genius of AI and what it's going to accomplish for the future of humanity. I'm not sure if you can feel through the medium of video my sanity slowly starting to slip away. I let it process for several days and it didn't move from this spot. And each one of those beeps you're hearing is when it presses one of the direction keys while the menu's open. That's the sound it makes when the cursor moves inside the menu. So it keeps flipping the menu closed, not moving, flipping the menu back open, and then pressing the direction keys all over the place, accomplishing absolutely nothing. I mean, can you blame me for starting to suspect that it was deliberately trying to annoy me? And things only got worse from here. I tried a whole bunch more things. I tried adding a whole bunch more B presses to the training data, somehow thinking that that was a good idea at the time. I wanted to see if that would encourage it to flip the item menu closed instead of just sitting there with it open, and maybe if it flipped it closed a little more often, it would actually move around the map, but no dice, it just sat there doing this for a long time, until I sent it to timeout.
You can't punish me. You're not even my real dad.
Then I tried pushing the B button as little as possible, and with this training data, Playfun managed to make it all the way to World 1 too, albeit with a ton of random pausing. And then, guess what, it dies right here, which, going back to my prediction, is what I was expecting right off the bat. Of course, we now know that it can get past this, and it may have if it had taken another shot at it, but instead it paused in the pit with the death music playing and refused to unpause, so it couldn't get another crack at the level. And I'm pretty sure it was doing this to prevent itself from losing a life. I had gotten a few 1-ups in its training data, so it probably had a high priority on its life count. And it had already lost 1 life in the first level, so it really didn't want to lose a second one. As I was trying to decide what to do next, I realized that there was something I had forgotten to do before giving Learnfun the most recent batch of training data, and that was to clean up the start inputs. And what that means is I open up the training data that I've recorded in a text editor, and when I do that, each of these lines of text represents 1 frame of inputs. This column of T's here is a single start button press. As you can see, it spans multiple frames. Even though I pressed the start button really fast, I had it held down for several frames. The NES runs at 60 frames per second, so even if you're holding a button for only 1/10 of a second, that's still 6 frames. Anyway, what I do is I remove all of them except the very first frame where I have the start button pressed. For some reason, Playfun seems to see this as the start button being pressed less often, even though the Nintendo itself sees a button being pressed over multiple frames as a single button press. I made that one change to the training data and then gave it back to Learnfun, and it gave me some very different output. As you can see, no trouble with the map this time. And there was a lot less pausing when we got into the level. However, the gameplay was about the same. Cleaning up the initial start inputs did seem to help somewhat, but it did start pausing after a while. And this iteration ended with this infamous situation that I highlighted in one of my shorts, in which Playfun fell down this pit and then paused the game for 10 solid minutes. And that's 10 minutes of in-game time. In terms of actual processing time, the computer sat there running the program for days on end to produce this scintillating output of just remaining paused. Within that 10 minutes, it did this a few times, briefly unpausing and then repausing again because it realized, oh, it's still stuck. There's still no way out. But just you wait. He's plotting. He's coming up with a way out of that pit. Just like Boba Fett. He's going to escape that Sarlacc. Unlike the Star Wars franchise, I wasn't willing to wait 39 years to see how our hero would get out of this situation, and it was at this point that I realized there was something I could do that might eliminate the pausing once and for all, and it was simply to do nothing. Well, for a little while anyway. And this is a good lesson in questioning your own assumptions. I had assumed that I needed to push start twice at the beginning of Mario 3, but you actually don't. You can just wait for this intro animation to play out completely, and then it automatically brings you to the start screen, and you can press start one time and start the game. And Playfun will wait to make its first input, the same amount of time that you waited in the training data to make the first input. So this wasn't a problem at all. It worked well, and there was no pausing.
See? Look at that. I haven't paused once yet.
This was absolutely maddening. I better cut away from this before I drive everybody mad. How had we gone from that amazing gameplay I showed you right up front, that first run through Super Mario Bros. 3, where it played like an absolute pro, got all the way to World 1-3, and got stuck on that one obstacle? How had we gone from that to this? I had only pushed the B button when I absolutely needed to here. Obviously, there was something going on beneath the surface that I couldn't see. There wasn't much I could do about that at the moment, but there was something I could do. It was time for drastic measures. I would create training data with a single, clean start button press at the beginning, and I would implement high jumps wherever I could, and no B button presses whatsoever. This would take care of the pausing. This would take care of the opening of the item menu, and it would hopefully allow Playfun to get past that obstacle in World 1-3, should it make it there by some miracle. What a refreshing treat this is to watch after those disasters we just saw. Granted, it's not progressing very fast. It can't run because it can't press the B button, but it is at least pushing forward. Oh, you little scamp. You know what? I don't even mind it this time because look at this clean movement. Just right back into the level, and this is how things should be. Almost makes me want to contemplate how I live my life a little bit. I mean, is it about rescuing the princess, or is it about the journey we take to get there?
The real princess is the friends we squished along the way.
Big pit jump coming up. Despite the lack of running ability, it doesn't seem to be having too much trouble with these pits. Okay, this is going very well. No, what's that? What was that? Okay, it's just a fluke. It's just a fluke. Here was the trouble spot. Okay, it's getting past this. It's getting past that. Okay, it was a fluke. Just a fluke. Going to my happy place here. We've got our enemy dodging skills in high gear here. Come on, Playfun, you are so close. You can do this. Just one more pit to get past, and we're through. We are clear through to the end of the level. I feel vindicated. Like all of the struggle was suddenly worth it. I'm telling you, if Playfun gets past World 1-3 here, if it even gets past that obstacle it got stuck on in World 1-3, I'm gonna lose my mind.
So, that was an adventure. Crazy as it made me, I'm glad I did this whole thing. I'm glad I followed up from that first run of Mario 3 and tried some additional things and just, played with the program because I learned a ton from it. And, one of the things I learned is that Playfun's output is deterministic. At least if you're running it on the same computer with the same training data, it will give you exactly the same output. I'm not sure if there's a difference, if there's any randomness at all that's introduced by running it on a different system, say with a different number of processors or something like that. Some difference that might introduce some randomness into the system. That's something I don't know the answer to right now. I've also learned that too much priority on life count is not always a good thing. If Playfun is too focused on not letting its life count go down, then it will resort to undesirable things like pausing and just freezing there and just not progressing because it doesn't want to lose its life count. So I guess the biggest lesson that I've learned from this whole process is that when you're trying to manipulate Playfun's output by by what you do in the training data, and you're aiming for a particular output by giving it a certain input. It's kind of like leading a wild horse, and not that I've ever done that, but it's what I imagine it would be like, is if you threw a rope around the neck of a wild horse and were trying to lead it somewhere. You might get it sort of going in the direction you want it to go, but there's a lot of randomness and you might get kicked in the face. There's just so much unpredictability. By doing certain things, I was able to get certain outcomes, but there's always a sacrifice to be made there as well, because, for example, like I showed you, by giving it training data in which I didn't press the B button, I was able to get Playfun and make more progress, but at the expense of it no longer playing like a human would play. The big question that I don't have an answer to right now is, why was pausing such a problem in Mario 3, but it wasn't a problem at all in Mario 1? At first I thought maybe it's because you can't pause after falling in a pit in Mario 1, but you actually can. I went and tested it. Just like Mario 3, you can pause after falling in a pit. So it's very, pretty much exactly the same situation. So I don't know why it was a problem in one game, but not in the other. Okay, I just want to read a couple of comments from the last video. I really appreciate all of the feedback on it. We had one commenter said, it'd be good if you could stop rewinding the footage so often. I want to see everything in one go, not everything many times. Thanks for the feedback. I'll keep that in mind for the future. And I'd like to know, would you like to see the entire run, uncut, unedited, no commentary of any of Playfun's runs? If you'd, if that's something that you, the audience, would be interested in, I'll try and find a way to make it happen. One comment says, sometimes I begin to feel that this sort of AI will replace those game journalists. Well, the thing about that is, I'm pretty sure that if you ported Cuphead to the NES, that Playfun would be able to beat the tutorial stage, so it's already overqualified. There were a lot of great suggestions for games that you all want to see this AI take on. Darkwing Duck, yes, that's a great idea. Prince of Persia, I'm definitely interested in doing that one. Micro Mages, which I had to go look up what that was. It's an NES game that was released in 2019. So that's a fascinating idea. I might do a separate video responding to more comments. Stay tuned for the next video, which will be Playfun taking on 5 different fighting games for the NES.
I have come to chew bubblegum and kick a large quantity of buttocks. And I cannot chew bubblegum. I also cannot kick buttocks. I have neither mouth nor feet.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Hit the, leave a comment below. All of that. You can find all of the important links, including our Patreon community servers, those kinds of things. All of those are in the description below. And I will talk to you very soon.